for maybe about 50-55 minutes,
Yes, sir.
and
Yes,
then
sir.
followed by
Yes, sir. About
question answer.
3:30 will be okay, sir.
Thank you, thank you, thanks a lot.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
So shall I
Please.
start?
Yes, sir. Please, sir. Please.
Okay, thank you. मेरे घर चल जाना थोड़ी देर में, वहाँ से खाना ले आना, जा नहीं पा रहा हूँ तो अभी नहीं, करीबन 7 में चल जाना। So are the slides visible, Dr. Singh?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Slides
Yes,
are
sir.
visible.
Thank you, thank you. So I will take about 45 minutes of presentation, and let me first thank Professor Singh and Professor Shishir Sinha, who is the director, as well as all the members in this community for inviting me on this validatory function of your FDP program. It's always a pleasure to share my ideas and views with a larger audience. So what I intended to do this time around is give you an idea about the research trends in semiconductor technology and where we will find ourselves in next decade. So persons working in this domain and in the areas of devices and how to use devices for the purpose of your next generation system design, that will be part of my understanding as far as this small lecture is concerned. So I am a professor in the Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering at IIT Roorkee, and currently head of the Department of ECE. And this is our main building, which is basically the known as James Thomson building, which houses the administrative block, having director and deputy director. This is a heritage site which is there. And with these words, let me start the outline today. So I will give you a small motivation why I'm doing this talk. Then I will give you some idea about maybe emerging nanoscale transistors and the concepts of FinFET, nanosheets, and forksheets. I won't have time to do all the rest of it, but if you want, you can have a one-to-one discussion over email in subsequent days. So the idea here is that in current technology, or in the current era of smartphone, where you are actually entering into 5G, and research is already started in the area of 6G and 7G, there is a requirement that there will be a large volumes of data which will be moving from your data centers and servers down to your consumer electronics, for example, your smartphone, tablets, and iPod. Which means that if you actually see in a very layman term, you are actually sending these uh, presence or absence of a voltage, billions of those such type of things over a wide network, right? And therefore what is happening is that you are spending large amount of energy in doing that, right? And that is coming to be a major bottleneck as far as system generation is concerned. Apart from the latency part, which is basically the frequency at which you can operate, the one of the major areas is now the amount of energy spent, or the amount of energy spent to handle the data is becoming more than the energy required to store a data, or for that matter to do a compute over the data. So your computational cost has come down, but your transmission cost has gone up in terms of energy, because you will have large number of these IoT devices which are connected in a wireless mode. So you need to take care of the security, you need to take care of their energy efficiency, and so on and so forth. So these two are the primary motivation why people are now shifting toward devices which are effectively low power and high performance devices. So with this basic fundamental thing, this small data which I have taken from Wikipedia, and these are that approximately you will be using large amount of emails and Facebook traffic or YouTube traffic. And what we expect to see is that by end of the fourth quarter of 2021, which is primarily October, November, December of 2021, you exponentially growth to about 25 billion digitally within India, you will have 25 billion devices across the world connected through the data centers. Now, if you look at the data center, cooling the data center costs as much as computing in the data center. So you can understand the importance of these traffics and high volumes of data which is there with all of us. Now, so to just give you an idea about where we are talking about or which domain these devices will fit into, I have just given you a small input. This is what is known as an AI stack, which we seldom call in the areas of VLSI, in the areas of artificial intelligence and machine learning. If you look at the outermost periphery of the circle, sort of a circle, you see these are actually the application domain. Say, for example, autonomous vehicle, intelligent robot, smart healthcare, smart home, smart city. And these are also coming within our India-specific program. So autonomous vehicle is one of the thrust areas of many of the companies currently within India. If you go one step below, then you see that for autonomous vehicle, one major application area is computer vision. So the computer vision has to be integrated within your vehicular system such that in real time you're able to access the data and take a real-time control feedback to make the, say for example, you are sensing that someone in the front is there, then automatically it will apply brake in such a manner that the distance as it goes nearer and nearer, the brakes goes on, the efficiency of the brake goes on increasing. So you understand now you will have systems where you have electronic at one end and then you have sensors and actuators in the front end. There will be sensors in the front end and actuators in the back end. And you need to have a coupling between mechanical as well as your electronic systems. Easier said than done, because in any way it is a very, very big problem which coming into picture. But while doing all this, you will understand there are a large number of vehicles across the world, right? And therefore the amount of data required to transmit is very, very large. And since this will be actually part of the electric vehicle technology which is going to come, you require that the amount of energy used by these microcontrollers, by these actuators are relatively small. So that's the major reason why we require that you should have a low power design. Say, for example, you are working with smart healthcare, right? You're working with smart healthcare. Say you're working with intelligent robots. You're working with smart homes, smart city. All these will require natural language processing, man-machine interaction, and so on and so forth. So you can understand days are coming when you will be actually have the devices at the back end, which has to integrate with the system at the front end. And the whole process flow, as a design engineer, you're supposed to know, if not the whole of it, at least the part of it in a very detailed manner. And this is therefore the basic AI stack which I was talking about. So let us, with this basic idea, let me go a big back end and give you an idea about what are the emerging nanoscale technologies which you will be able to see in coming decade. Already has come and more will be coming in coming decades. Let me explain to you what is the primary bottleneck for low power or low energy as far as emerging nanoscale transistors are concerned. Since all of you are here, I suppose faculty members or students of electronics, I need not explain to a MOSFET, but then you also know that that a MOSFET is limited by a subthreshold slope of 60 millivolts per decade, right? So at 300 Kelvin, the lower limit for any transistor is approximately 60 millivolts per decade, meaning that if a transistor is to switch from on to off state or vice versa, on the gate side, you have to give a peak-to-peak voltage variation of approximately 60 millivolt, right? That is the primary bottleneck. Anything lower than that, you won't be able to switch the device from on to off state. And this is known as what is known as a Boltzmann tyranny, right? So how do you find out the slope? You just plot log of ID versus VG, then try to take the slope of it. Inverse of slope gives you the subthreshold slope, right? And at 300 Kelvin, therefore, so why I'm saying this is important, because you can understand, if I'm able to reduce this Boltzmann tyranny bottleneck, I will be able to switch between on to off state at a much faster pace at a much lower voltage swing. So I need to give up, say, let us suppose I give you 20 millivolts per decade. So as compared to 60 millivolts, 20 millivolt will be a lower peak to peak, and the swing can be very easily controlled, and not only controlled, it will be very fast. So that's the whole idea why we want to go for a very high switching speed device of the nanoscale. Right? One of the examples which already you are aware of is basically your bulk MOSFET. Typically, if you look, current bulk MOSFETs at low technology nodes have their subthreshold slope somewhere between 80 to 120 millivolts per decade, right? And which means that it requires 120 millivolts of an external voltage on the gate side for the device to go from on to off state. This is the basic idea behind the emerging devices, emerging nanoscale devices. So what is the general understanding? So let me give you a brief idea about, all of you are aware of MOSFETs, that MOSFET works on the concept of drift diffusion, right? Which means that you will form an inversion layer. So I have you have this gate here. I have a source and drain. When you apply a positive gate voltage, all the electrons from the bulk gets pulled up towards the channel, and a channel is formed, and it's get inverted, and you have a current flow, right? And that is primarily a drift current. What is a drift current? That you apply a drain voltage. When you apply a drain voltage, there's an electric field. This electric field pulls the electron. As a result, there's a current flow. This is known as drift diffusion model of a transistor, right? But what happens is that can we have, therefore, a different type of transistor which does not depend directly upon drift diffusion, right? It depends upon some other form of an alternative approach of current generation. And some of the examples which you can see is basically your tunnel FETs, which you see here, one of the examples. Another is known as impact ionization FET, which is you see here. And then you have NEMS, which is nano electromechanical switch. These are the three types of devices which have come in vogue in recent years. But I will just concentrate on tunnel FETs to explain to you the basic idea of reducing the subthreshold slope when you're talking of transistors. So I will just give you a brief idea. Let's see, since all of you are having electronics background, I need not go into details of all of these. I'll just give you a brief idea about how I'm doing it. So you see, it is almost looks like that the structure, if you see here, it almost looks like a bulk MOSFET, right? Which is basically a source. I have a drain and I have an intrinsic layer and I have a gate voltage. So it's almost like a bulk MOSFET sort of structure which you see. Correct. And this bulk MOSFET structure, if you see very carefully, and if you look at the Fermi level diagram which I have drawn here, energy level diagram, then you can see that. In the energy level diagram, that on the P. So you see, the idea is that I should have large number of electrons, or for that matter, large number of current carrier structures on the left hand side, and I should have a very large empty space. So it's very simple and straightforward to understand for a layman. If, say, for example, if I want to push water from point A to point B, I need to ensure that point B is initially empty and point A is filled with water. Not only that, point A is at a higher energy as compared to point B, and therefore simply it can flow from point A to point B. So it's just like in a dam, you flow water from a reservoir, which has a large amount of energy, and to a drain, which has got a lesser amount of energy. Exactly same thing happens between this P plus layer and the intrinsic layer. You see that I have this energy barrier here, but this energy barrier is quite large in dimensions, right? It's quite large in dimensions, right? And therefore, it is becoming difficult for the holes to move from source towards the intrinsic layer. Though it's a P-type material, but since the distance between the two is so large that it cannot break this barrier easily. So I require to have very thin barrier, first of all, and I require to have empty states on the right-hand side where the electrons or holes are going to station. So these are the two primary sort of mechanism or two primary reasons for the tunnel FET, or the idea of tunnel FET. So I'll just go into the brief idea. I'll just show you how a tunnel FET works. If you look very carefully, the top one is basically your MOSFET, right? Which is a metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistor. And how do you form it is you apply a gate voltage. When you apply a gate voltage, you have this inversion layer. So this blue color which you see on the right hand side is an inversion layer. And what is happening is that just to apply a drain voltage, all the electrons will move from source to drain. This is your Fermi level. EF is a Fermi level. What happens in the below? You see, the structure wise, it's almost the same. Only thing is that this N double plus, which is the source side, is replaced by P double plus. So this is also known as a PIN structure. P means p-type, I means intrinsic layer, N means electrons. So it's a pin structure. Now, if you look at the pin structure, and if you look at the band diagram on the right hand side, you can safely see that the blue one is filling up to a larger, till the Fermi level, your blue one is filled. So your valence band is fully filled up to p-type. And your Fermi level is well within your valence band, right? Which means that there are a large number of states which are filled up. However, if you look at the intrinsic side and the drain side, then you will see that in the intrinsic side, it is filled up, but there are a large number of empty states also available on the intrinsic side, right? So if you are able to reduce this distance, which is basically this green color arrow, if you're able to reduce that, then you will have this tunneling of holes from this end to this end at a much faster pace and at a much larger probability. So we define what is known as a BT-BT, or band to band tunneling. I will go one by one to explain to you the basic idea of a tunnel FET. Now you see, if you look at this point where your VG is almost very, very small, it's almost negative in direction. Then you see, if you look at this band diagram here, so you understand, if you apply a gate voltage which is positive in nature, your energy E is equals to minus Q into V, right? Because you're talking about electron energies. Because with respect to electron, you try to find out the energy. It's minus Q into V. So if you apply a positive bias on the gate side or on the drain side, you will be actually pushing the energy barriers down, right? Please understand this basic idea. So higher the gate voltage, more lower will be your conduction band edge on the intrinsic and the drain side, right? And that is what is happening if you look at the second figure to the top, down, bottom left figure. There, what you're seeing, you're very, very low gate voltage, and the separation is very large. And if you see the red line, they are very, very thin in dimensions, which means that there's no tunneling happening. Now what I do, suddenly I increase the gate voltage to approximately 0.1 or 0.2, somewhere here. Then what happens is that you're pushing this layer, this one, further down. When you push it further down, the effective distance actually reduces between the intrinsic layer and the source layer. And therefore, you will have a heavy, large amount of electrons which will be flowing across the source drain region. This is what is known as a band-to-band tunneling, right? And you will have a heavy band-to-band tunneling taking place here. But as you further go on increasing the gate voltage, right, and you go to 0.4, 0.3 to 0.4, you see there's a saturation tendency coming into picture. And the reason is that, so therefore the probability of tunneling goes on reducing as you go on increasing the gate voltage beyond approximately 0.1 and 0.2 up to 0.3 and 0.4. It reduces. So you see it reduces, and therefore there is a flattening out of the drain current for a tunnel FET at higher gate voltages, almost like a bulk MOSFET behavior. But you see the operation is just like the IDVT is almost like a bulk MOSFET, but the methodology by which we have formed these electrons or the holes is relatively totally different as compared to a bulk MOSFET, right? And that's the reason we are gaining something out of the tunnel FET idea. Now, generally, there are two types of junctions which tunnel FETs generally have. One is known as a homojunction. Homojunction basically means if all the material used is of silicon, right? So you have a P plus silicon here, I have an intrinsic silicon here, and I have an N plus silicon here. So this is referred to as a homojunction. Means all the junctions are of the same material, right? Whereas I can also have an heterojunction where I use my P-type material as germanium, and I also use silicon as my intrinsic layer and my N plus, which is the drain side, as my silicon. The difference between the first structure, homojunction, and the second junction is that the barrier is very, very steep in case of heterojunctions, right? Because if you take a P plus germanium and intrinsic silicon barrier, the barrier is very, very steep, which means that the barrier distance is relatively very small, which allows for a larger BT-BT, and therefore the probability of tunneling increases drastically as you have a heterojunction as compared to a homojunction. So I just wanted to keep you abreast with this basic idea that generally when you try to form a larger current, basically tunnel FET, you ensure that you have a heterojunction. The cost you pay for it is that your fabrication costs increases, because now you have to have this germanium silicon process has to be maintained across the heterojunction, and that makes the life difficult for the fabrication person. But then the cost you gain out of it is that you get a larger current because of BT-BT. Okay, with this we understood one of the basic concepts of tunnel FET, that what is a tunnel FET, what is the operation of tunnel FET, and how tunnel FET gives you current as compared to a bulk MOSFET. So let me now come to the next section or next talk or next part of the talk, and that is what is known as a super transistor technology. And this is where a large amount of researchers in various domains across the world are trying to contribute in this area. Don't worry about this formula here. You just have to worry about two important points. The important point is that if you apply a gate voltage, I do have a graph here. Maybe I can show you here. Right. If you look at this graph, forget about what is there, ferroelectric. Just forget about it. Take this as a tunnel FET, and if I apply a gate voltage, I have an oxide layer here, right? This light green color is basically my oxide layer, and this gate is basically my metal. So if I apply a gate voltage, right, which is positive in nature, then there will be some voltage drop across the oxide layer, and the channel will see actually a smaller voltage as compared to the voltage given on the gate side. You're able to get the picture? Which means that on the gate side, if I give 1 volt, I will be actually seeing a voltage of say 0.7 or 0.8 volts in the channel, right? So why? Because 0.2 volt has actually gone to overcome the resistance of the oxide layer, because you will be using either hafnium oxide or silicon dioxide. But the idea is, if I can do something reverse, and that's where the super transistor technology comes into picture, that if I give a 1 volt and I'm able to achieve a 1.2 volt or 1.3 volt in the channel, then I will be able to push the channel side conduction band much more easily as compared to the previous case. Please understand the difference between the two cases. The first case is I have purely an oxide layer, therefore I give a gate voltage. Once I give a gate voltage, I give suppose 1 volt, then it appears as 0.8 for the channel, and there will be some band bending on the intrinsic layer. However, if I give 1 volt and there is an amplification of the DC bias and it goes to 1.2 volt or 1.3 volt, then the band bending will be much, much larger. By how much? By approximately 0.5 into Q. That much amount of further band bending will be there, and the BT-BT will increase and the current will increase, right? With this basic idea, what people thought was, and people gave an idea was that, and that's the reason we did have this a seminal paper by Saif Salahuddin. In 2008, he published this paper. So it's approximately a decade old concept. The concept is decade old, but realization in silicon is still happening now, is what is known as the NC-FET, or negative capacitance field effect transistor, right? Negative capacitance field effect transistor. I will explain to you what the basic idea behind NC-FET is all about. What we are planning to do is, or what the researchers are doing over a period of time, is trying to reach to the third quadrant of this super transistor technology, where your subthreshold slope will be less than 60, because you want that high switching speeds. So your subthreshold slope should be less than 60, lower the better. And M is a quantity which is less than 1, primarily means that you are amplifying the signal on the gate side. M greater than 1 basically means you are not amplifying, in fact you are degrading the gate voltage. M less than 1 means you are amplifying the gate voltage, right? So final result or the final idea or the final hypothesis where we will all try to reach as a device engineer or as a device physicist is try to reach to a point where m is less than 1, and you are able to therefore amplify the gate voltage which appears on the channel, and n less than 60 primarily means that you are able to switch the speed. So both ways you are a winner, because you will be operating at higher frequencies operation. And more so, it has become a more why it has caught the imagination of researchers across the world is that for all your 5G operations, when you're including 5G, your mid-band frequency for 5G is around 24 to 26 gigahertz. So you require that the transceiver which you designed there should have at least a F3 dB of 24, 25 gigahertz. Right? Now your bulk MOSFETs or FinFETs won't be able to do that. But a good idea is basically your NC TFET, which will give you a brief idea. So to understand an NC TFET, let me just show you this diagram which I had earlier shown you. So what we do is, we just, after the gate, we put this ferroelectric layer, right? And that's the only thing we are doing. So you understand there is no drastic change in the process parameter. It is just that we are adding a ferroelectric capacitor with the gate side, right? And then on the gate side, we are applying a voltage. Now the ferroelectric capacitor or ferroelectric material is effectively a polarizing material. You must be knowing that, which means that if we apply a voltage, there's an electric field which is flowing through them. This electric field tries to polarize the dipoles present within the ferroelectric material, and then it tries to therefore amplify the signal towards the channel, right? So this is therefore the concept of ferroelectric capacitor, which is coming into the supertransistor theory. This gives you so the tunnel FET concept gives you a steep subthreshold slope, less than 60 millivolt per decade, and capacitor gives you amplification in your DC bias, and therefore both help you to increase the on current as compared to a tunnel FET, right? This is Kobayashi in 2017 used a negative capacitance tunnel FET, and he showed that your drain current, if you see drain current versus gate voltage, and if you see the red one, it's much more steeper curve as compared to the black one. The black one is basically your TFET. So more steep it is, more steep is your design, more is your more faster switching speeds will be there for the device itself, right? That is what the idea, or that is what the basic concept is all about as far as super transistor is concerned, right? Okay. Now what will happen therefore is this super transistor will actually give you a much faster switching speeds, right? Not only that, you don't have to change the overall structure of the fabrication technology, because fabrication does not, people don't want to change fabrication too much because it's a cost intensive process. People don't want to do that, right? And that's the reason we are trying to have the same technology and try to have the super transistor inbuilt over it, right? So let's look at the industry roadmap. So because I just wanted to give you a brief idea about where we are heading. If you look at this map, this is basically a map which many investors follow, which many of the people follow, and that is if you look at this TSMC, Intel, Samsung, Global Foundries, UMC are basically the foundries and device foundries which make them. If you look very carefully and look at TSMC, you have this 3 nanometer FinFET technology maturing around 2022. In fact, day before yesterday, we heard from TSMC that we will be having a 2 nanometer FinFET already matured in their fab lab at Taiwan. However, Intel didn't go for lowering this technology node. Intel went ahead with the 10 nanometer FinFET, and they went into some structural changes in the FinFET. For example, a super fin structure and so on and so forth. Samsung still works with gate-all-around MOSFETs at 3 nanometer. right? Whereas GF, the Global Foundries and EMC works with 14 nanometer FinFET till now, right? So this is where the industry or the technology is moving. Now, since though FinFET occupies the major stay in industry, we would expect to see NC TFET, TFET. TFET won't be too much coming into picture maybe, but NC TFET will, it seems to be coming into picture in next 5 to 6 years within the technology world as far as Intel is, as far as device fabrication is concerned, right? Now let me come to another interesting device. Device. So we have understood what is a tunnel FET. We have also understood what is an NC FET, at least in a very brief manner. This actually requires about 6 to 7 hours of dedicated learning, but since the time is short, I will just give you a brief insight so that you can take of this. With this input, you can actually jump onto much better materials and other open source material which you can consult. If you look at planar FETs, right? Planar FET worked very well till 2011, right? 2011, even for mixed signal and analog design, people still use 180 nanometer bulk MOSFET technology. But for all your digital technology, for example, digital DSP, for all your digital applications, people have actually shifted to FinFETs. And if you look at the FinFET, what has happened is that it's become a quasi 3D planar structure. So if you look at this structure at the top, that's basically a planar FET or a planar FinFET, right? You will have a heavy leakage of power, so you will have large amount of leakage currents. What happened in FinFET was that the channel which was straight here, you basically thinned it and you had like this. So the brown one is basically the channel, and the golden color is basically your gate. So the gate is surrounding the channel in 1, 2, and 3 directions. Whereas in a planar FET, the gate is surrounding only in one direction. So once the gate has a better control over the channel, it gives you a better or a reduced leakage, right? And therefore your static power dissipations are much reduced in case of FinFETs. However, the cost you pay for it is that since it's a 3D planar structure, you will have large amount of parasitic capacitances between this gate and the source and drain area, right? It's just like a 2 parallel plate capacitors connected back to back, because of which you would expect to see a reduction in the 3 dB bandwidth. But then what you gain out of it is that the current is so large that even if there is a capacitance which is there, since the current is large, you automatically have relatively higher. So what happens is that ion increases, your gate capacitance also increases, right? And the ratio of that still remains the same. So you would expect to see a much larger 3 dB bandwidth in case of FinFET. A new device has been launched, and this is about 3 to 4 years old, 3 years old device. If you look very carefully, Intel, Samsung, GF, they're all looking into it, and that is what is known as a stacked nanosheet FET. What they do is they break it down, this FinFET into small layers here, right? These small layers have been broken down here. Now what is happening is, you see the channel is surrounded by all the 4 sides. So this is basically a GAA device, gate all-around device, also known as a stacked FinFET. 2 things: much better control over the current as far as FinFET is concerned compared to FinFET, and the leakage currents are also reduced. How do you make it? How do you fabricate these nanosheet devices? One good idea, just since most of you are students here, one good idea, whenever you present some document, if you're taking from source, please make that source known on the PowerPoint presentation itself. For example, I have this IEEE spectrum I have taken, so I have given the acknowledgement of IEEE spectrum. That's a good practice in terms of presentation, in terms of explaining something. Anyway, so what people do is that they grow a stacks of silicon and germanium, right? And then you selectively etch away germanium from here and your silicon layer, and then you do a gate dielectric, put an oxide layer across the 2 dielectric, and then you put a metal gate over it. So this is known as the atomic layer deposition, which builds the metal and surrounds the gate, right? So I have a superlattice of silicon and silicon germanium. Selectively etch away the germanium, so only silicon is left, surrounded by gate dielectric, which is basically silicon dioxide, or if you want to have a better control, hafnium dioxide. After that, using ALD process, you can put up a metal gate here and you have a better control over the channel. So what you see in front of you is basically a nanosheet as fabricated in Purdue University. They have already done that. They fabricated it in there, and this is basically transmission electron microscopy image. And as you can see here, the triangles which you see are basically nanosheets. So these are basically your nanosheets here. This, and this is a nanosheet. And the gate is surrounding in all the 4 directions in the nanosheet, right? Though it is easier said than done, but you see there will be an intersheet capacitance. So between this sheet and this sheet, there will be a capacitance. Between this and this, there will be a capacitance. Between this and this, there will be capacitance. So there will be large number of intersheet capacitances which will be coming into picture, right? And that makes high frequency operation of nanosheets difficult. But then, as I again pointed you out, since it's a nanosheet, so you have a larger sort of area for the current to flow, and therefore the current ion also increases in case of a nanosheet. Right, so we have understood FinFET, right? And so where we are going now, we have understood FinFET. Nanosheet is also known to me. Let me come to a third important one, which has come up from IMEC Belgium, though it is still not in the open domain. So I cannot discuss with you the physics of the device, nor the structure of the device, but I can give you the basic idea of the device, and that is what is known as a Fox sheet transistor, right? It is developed by IMEC Belgium, and the Fox sheet. So if you are aware that when you make an N-MOSFET, right, enhancement mode N-MOSFET, you try to keep the substrate as P-type, right? Similarly, if you want to make a P-MOSFET, you want to make the substrate N-type. Now, you all are aware of twin-tap process, right, in CMOS, and you apply guard rings so that there is no shorting between NMOS device and PMOS device. But while doing so, you end up having utilizing larger area, right? Larger area is being utilized, as a result of which that the silicon area is utilized more, and therefore it does not become that much economical in terms of generating the device. What Fox sheet transistor interestingly does is, on the same platform, just like FinFET or a nanosheet, it tries to grow an N-MOSFET, which is the blue one, and the P-MOSFET, which is the pink one, right? So within the same area, silicon area, I am able to map both NMOS and PMOS. So I can actually have an inverter designed within the Fox sheet very easily, right? And that's the advantage of having a Fox sheet as compared to a FinFET or a nanosheet. That the silicon area budgeting is much better in a Fox sheet as compared to a FinFET or a nanosheet. I think So if you want to read more about the Fox sheet and you are interested to work on this domain, please look at these 2 papers which I have referred to in this slide, which is basically these both are members of IMEC team, and in IEDM 2019 they presented this paper. These 2 papers, which are basically post-FinFET. So we are looking at post-FinFET era, right? FinFET will still remain with us for the next 5 years. And my take on the subject is that FinFET will still remain for the next 5 years. But you would expect to see in next 2 to 3 years, stacked nanosheet coming into in a detailed manner. And you would expect to see playing a major role in this domain. With this, I think my technical part of the talk is over. I will not go into details of this one. I thought of sharing a slide with you, maybe one small slide, before I close my talk. And that is this one. For those who are trying to do research, or those who want to do research, right? So the first thing, if you want to do a research, is you should have passion for the subject, right? So if you look at the y-axis here, this is a grad student's motivation level. There's a grad student who is just now graduated from a master's program or a BTech program, and he wants to do a PhD. So he has got high optimism that he will be able to do good and all those things. Now what happens is that once he gets an admission, he will be then, because then he comes into a area of or his lab mates who are equal or better than him. So his motivation level goes down, right? But then the advisor comes into picture and puts him into a good mood, tries to say that you will be doing some great, and your motivation level also goes up, right? So this up and down wave sort of comes in the life of a PhD scholar as well as everybody. So when you reach the PhD defense, right, this one, you are at their optimal best. Why? Because you know that you've done a very good work, which is possibly adding to the state of the art, and your motivation levels is very high. But why does it suddenly come down? It comes down because you are told to defend your 5 years of work in approximately 45 minutes, right? Which is very, very difficult to do. So you always feel that most of my work is not represented properly in front of my committee members, and therefore they are not able to appreciate the whole PhD thesis. Then you start to write your thesis in a much more better manner, working with your advisor and so on and so forth. Then somebody reads your thesis, tells you to do that, and then what happens after getting a PhD degree? Your motivation level again goes down because you feel that there's no job. But let me assure you that if you do a very good PhD from any of the institute, doesn't matter, the job level is still much better, not only in academics but also in industry, right? If you do a good PhD and you're adding a state of the art. So I am again advising my young friends, those who are doing PhD or those who are thinking of doing PhD, that it's always a good idea to first keep yourself motivated across the domain. You will get frustrated, you will also get demotivated, but then that is the whole game plan, that you need to make yourself mentally and physically strong to have the gruels of work done. And please understand that please appreciate also that you're adding some state of the art to your PhD process. Some key questions before I close my talk is how will you do your scientific research, right? These are all philosophical questions, which maybe your advisor will be the best person to discuss with you. Please treat your advisor as your friend, as your mentor, as your friend for the period of the time, and then subsequently after that, right? And then it is always very important to publish papers. I agree with that. It is important because you want your results to be validated and verified across large platform within the institute as well as outside the institute. So it's important to publish, but publishing is not the end game of all. Publishing is just a part of it, right? Your end game is that have you added some knowledge base to the existing knowledge base? How do you plan your thesis? That's quite important. You should know what should be a chapter number 3, chapter number 4, 5, 6. Generally, the first chapter is introduction, second is literature survey, and then the third, fourth, fifth, sixth is your work, and then seventh you end up, right? And then how do you plan so once you enter into a PhD, you need to plan your research in such a manner that if you're doing a theoretical work, what inputs do you require? What hardware do you require? If you're doing an experimental work, what instruments do you require? If a plan A fails, do you have a plan B available with you, which will be taking over from plan A? Otherwise, you will be in a mess. And then please be aware, please be motivated to face rejections, right? So there will be, so I have published say X number of papers, but understand that in front of those X presentations, I have maybe 4X rejections lurking at me. You get the point? So while you get rejected, don't get disheartened. While you get accepted, don't get very much impressed about it. You will learn all these things as you move along during your PhD journey, right? So with this small pep talk to all of you, I thought of ending my presentation because I'm sorry I was supposed to stay with you till 1 hour, but suddenly there was a change in my institute. There was some function which was scheduled at 6:30 in the evening. It got shifted to 4 o'clock because of some external issues. So I have to go to the that building you, I saw you, I told you in the first meeting, there I have to go some presentation and all those things. So I will stop here, but I will be very happy to answer some of your questions, and maybe some of you want to ask some questions or anything. I will be most happy to answer to the best of my capability. Thank you.
So any questions or queries from audience? Yes, please ask, please.
You can unmute yourself and ask the question.
I've been trying. Okay, there. This time it was successful. A very interesting presentation. I particularly loved your last two slides. If not a question, certainly a comment. My name is Dr. Sanjeev Sansgiri. I'm tuned in from Pune. Okay, so that's me. The question I have is, I've been noticing in majority of academic circles that PhD is a means of or a stepping stone for promotions, and rather than looking at it as a form of personal growth and creating a platform for further enhancements, not only of self, but also people around you, including maybe PG scholars and encouraging research and growth of institutes, that is taking a very secondary priority. So, having seen what you have presented, I would like your thoughts on encouraging people to go beyond just having this narrow view of needing a PhD for promotions and then that's it. And the second facet I would like you to address is in today's world, if you and I even sneeze, tomorrow there is somebody to publish that work. Okay, so there has to be certain level of credibility in where you publish. Now, SCI paper is the only standard that is a credible standard. But having said that, that upsets 90% of the community because making an SCI paper and achieving that is a difficult task. So some agencies, some academic institutions dilute this and say at least a Scopus indexed. But then ethically, you should not be spending anything. Because if you have to put in money to get yourself published somewhere, as far as I'm concerned, it's all the same. Whether it's a garbage journal or anything, the same. So these are two things I would like you to throw some lights. Maybe people would get attracted to research for not the wrong reasons, but the right reasons.
Correct.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjeev, for your nice comments. I 100% agree with both of your comments, especially staying in academics. I hope you're also an academician. Staying in academics of late, last about a decade or so, there has been a rush of publishing papers. So and I don't fully blame these people, because when we go to a meeting or any of the open forum, we are judged by how many papers rather than the quality of papers. And not all of them, but in most of the open-ended meetings and discussions. I fully agree with you that this will be all the research scholars who are trying to enter into this domain, or who are trying to pursue research, need to think twice before entering this. That's the reason I told you the first statement I used was the passion. If you don't have a passion for this, I don't think it's a good idea to enter, because the failures are also there in this domain. So one has to be passionate, and don't link the number of publication, as you rightly pointed out, with the capability of a research scholar, right? I have seen a thesis, I'm being very frank on an open forum, IIT Kanpur thesis of 32 pages with just one conference publication, highly cited by a large number of people across the world in electrical engineering. So those who are arguing against this, I give you an example which is in front of you, and it is an open domain example. As far as the second point is concerned, that's true that there is always a rush for predatory journals. I hope, since academic freedom it's a dual-edged sword, so everybody themselves have to keep in mind that please don't send journals to predatory journals. Don't send papers there. And if you spend money to do that, it is still the worst. Please don't do that. That's the only thing I can give my comments on. It's again very person-centric, very institute-specific domain. I think I will rest my case there. Thank you.
So, to some assignment in his institute. So, I would like to invite our director to and bless us and to Suresh. Director sir. Some network problem is here.
No problem, no problem. So please convey my regards to Professor Sinha. He is my next door neighbor at IIT Roorkee. So I thought of meeting. दिखाई दे रहे हैं.
हाय सुदेव.
हाय शिशिर, कैसे हैं?
बस बढ़िया.
अरे वेरी गुड टू सी यू. वेरी गुड. थैंक्स अ लॉट. थैंक यू शिशिर जी.
चलिए बढ़िया. आपने कहा इट वाज एन अपॉर्चुनिटी टू लिसन यू.
एक्चुअली आई वुड हैव स्टेड फॉर अ लॉन्गर. वो आज ना वो दैट 7 न्यू प्रोग्राम्स आर लॉन्च्ड.
हाँ ऑनलाइन उसकी मेल आई थी.
वो 6:30 बजे था, तो मैंने यहाँ टाइम दे दिया था. अब वो प्रोफेसर आशुतोष शर्मा ने उसको 4 बजे कर दिया.
हाँ अब हमारे पास भी आया. अभी हम भी 4 बजे ज्वाइन करेंगे.
हाँ एकदम ज्वाइन कीजिएगा. ठीक है. ओके थैंक यू.
तो और रुड़की में सब ठीक चल रहा है?
एकदम सब ठीक है. बहुत बारिश हुई कल तो, एंड इट वाज वेरी प्लेजेंट, बट अदरवाइज एवरीथिंग इज फाइन. मिसिंग यू.
आई एम जस्ट कमिंग.
नहीं आई नो. आपका गाड़ी देखा मैंने उस दिन, 2 दिन पहले. इट वाज नियर योर हाउस, सो आई थॉट ऑफ यू मस्ट हैव कम फॉर सम वर्क देन.
नहीं मेरी गाड़ी नहीं आई होगी.
अच्छा किसी और की थी उसका मतलब.
अब आएगी गाड़ी ना. कुछ काम है मुझे यहीं का. आईआरएस का कुछ काम है.
नहीं श्योर मोस्ट
वेलकम. परिदा से है. यहाँ पर हम लोग डेवलप कर रहे हैं ना इंस्टीट्यूशनल रैंकिंग फ्रेमवर्क यूपी के लिए.
जी.
तो उसमें जो है वो वहाँ पर जो अपने यहाँ जो रैंकिंग फ्रेमवर्क में सोनिका और उनका परिदा के साथ कुछ थोड़ा सा वो है.
नहीं दैट्स गुड.
फाइनल हो गया तो उसमें.
थैंक यू सर. थैंक यू.
हाँ चलिए बढ़िया रहा. अच्छा रहा. इसी बहाने सुदेव की शक्ल दिख गई.
आपसे भी मुलाकात हो गई. सबसे मुलाकात हो गई यहाँ पे. दैट्स नाइस. ठीक है. ठीक.
हर्ष
sir, kindly bless us with validatory remarks.
Okay, so thank you Harsh, and extremely thankful for Sudev, especially thankful for Sudev, a long time colleague of mine at IIT Roorkee. So it's indeed a privilege to see Sudev on one of the screen.
Thank you very
And
much. Thanks a lot.
I hope that all the participants of this particular FTP program benefited by the esteemed presence of esteemed galaxy of you can say the speakers across country. And once again, I am extremely thankful to all the speakers as well as organizers for organizing such a good FDP. And I am still hopeful that those who participated in this particular FDP program will be get benefited by the rich experience of the speakers. And I was just listening with the questioning question answer with the Sudev, Professor Sudev Dasgupta, and it was extremely very good to see that this particular FDP has become an interactive FDP. And I am thankful to all the speakers, participants, as well as the organizers for such a nice organization of this FDP. And my special thanks to Harsh for bringing Professor Sudev across the table. And extremely thanks to Sudev. He is my neighbor at IIT Roorkee, and it's really privileged to see the Sudev. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Dr. Singh, Dr. Harsh Vikram.
सर मेरा एक छोटा सा निवेदन था, क्या मैं बोल सकता हूँ?
हाँ हाँ अवश्य बोलिए।
जी सर, मेरा नाम सौरभ नौरंगिया है, मैं जबलपुर एमपी से बात कर रहा हूँ।
जी 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 बताइए।
सर अंत में मैं सबसे एक ही निवेदन करता हूँ सर, क्या किसी भी एफडीपी में हम अपनी इंडियन लैंग्वेज का इस्तेमाल नहीं कर सकते हैं या कर पाएंगे कभी? क्योंकि जब मैं आप दोनों की बात जी
हाँ अवश्य बिल्कुल। देखिए मैं आपको बताऊं कि यहाँ पर मैं देख रहा हूँ बहुत सारे जो है बाहर के भी लोग हैं। और दूसरा आपको ये बताऊं कि नेशनल एजुकेशन जो पॉलिसी है उसमें भी जो है वो हमारा जो मैंडेट है वो रीजनल लैंग्वेज को प्रमोट करना है। सो अवश्य अगर जो है आपके संस्थान में या कहीं पर भी कोई हिंदी में होगा तो हम लोग जो है अवश्य उसमें जो है इस चीज़ को करेंगे। और हम तो हिंदी के घनघोर समर्थक है, इसीलिए हमने अपने व्हाट्सएप पर भी लिख रखा है निज भाषा की उन्नति है सब उन्नति को मूल। तो ये अवश्य हम करेंगे, इसमें कोई ऐसी वो नहीं है इसमें। लेकिन यह है कि इसमें सभी व्यक्तियों का जो है वो एक तरीके से समेकित हमको जानकारी और समेकित जो है उनका पार्टिसिपेशन जरूरी होता है। इस वजह से जो है ये अंग्रेजी में जो है वो वार्तालाप होता रहता है, तो इसलिए उसको। और अवश्य अगर यदि जो है संभव हुआ तो मैं बल्कि हर्ष विक्रम और वाई के मिश्रा जी हमारे सामने बैठे हुए, इनसे ये कहूँगा, डीन स्टूडेंट भी है हमारे यहाँ, कि ये जो है हिंदी में किसी एक जो है वो एफडीपी प्रोग्राम का आयोजन करें।
जी सर,
जरूर सर,
धन्यवाद सर। ये क्वेश्चन मेरा इसलिए जनरेट हुआ, मैं हर एफडीपी में लगभग ये क्वेश्चन पूछता हूँ, क्योंकि जब मैंने सर की और आपकी वार्तालाप सुनी तो एक अपनापन था।
हाँ ये बिल्कुल। देखिए ऐसा है कि मैं आपको बताऊं, मैं पिछले 3 महीने से यहाँ का निदेशक हूँ। उसके पहले मैं संकाय सदस्य था रासायनिक अभियांत्रिकी विभाग IIT रुड़की में। और सुदेव जो है वो उनसे हमारे बड़े व्यक्तिगत जो है संबंध रहे हैं। ये जरूर इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स इंजीनियरिंग में विभागाध्यक्ष हैं और साथ में हमारे जो IIT रुड़की के निदेशक हैं उनके भी बॉस हैं, क्योंकि वो संकाय सदस्य हैं इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स इंजीनियरिंग डिपार्टमेंट के, और हमारे पड़ोसी भी हैं। तो एक अपनापन लगता है। और दूसरा ये होता है कि ये एक केवल एक उद्देश्य हमारा ये था कि जो एक स्पीकर होता है, देखिए जब ये एफडीपी होती है तो जब फिजिकल फॉर्म में होती थी तो सब लोग एक परिवार की तरह वहाँ पर हफ्ता 10 दिन रहते थे, और तब एक उनका वो होता था। और एक स्पीकर जो आता था उसके साथ जो है वो उतनी जो है जिसे कहना चाहिए एफिनिटी नहीं हो पाती थी। तो ये मेरा उद्देश्य था कि जो अपनापन है वो इससे, कि मेरी समझ से सुदेव जो है वो इनमें से शायद हर्ष को और प्रोफेसर वाई.के. मिश्रा को छोड़ के और शायद किसी भी पार्टिसिपेंट्स को व्यक्तिगत तौर पे नहीं जानते होंगे। तो उसमें ये था कि एक अपनत्व आ जाए और उससे जो है स्पीकर भी कंफर्टेबल हो जाता है और जो है जो निदेशक है वो भी कंफर्टेबल हो जाता है और पार्टिसिपेंट्स भी। तो एक इनफॉर्मल तरीका जो है उस पर जो है वो आ जाता है। इस वजह से हमारा जो है अपनत्व था। और बाकी तो यदि आप किसी और स्पीकर के साथ करेंगे तो हम भी उसको जो है हम लोग उस पे जाएंगे।
जी सर। सर क्योंकि जितने भी जर्नल या पब्लिकेशन हाउस हैं जो जेन्युइन हैं, वो मैं सर्च करता हूँ हमेशा वो अदर लैंग्वेज में ही होते हैं। मुझे अभी तक तो ऐसा कोई जर्नल नहीं मिला है जो हिंदी में हो और उसको हम ऑथेंटिक बोल सके 110%।
देखिए
ये एक
मैं
मेरा
आपको
निवेदन था आप सभी
जो
लोगों से कि हम कुछ
सौरभ जी जो जर्नल का है उसके बारे में मेरे थोड़े से भिन्न विचार हैं। मेरा भिन्न विचार ये है कि जो जर्नल है वो आपके जो है वो एक बिजनेस मॉडल पर वर्क करते हैं, और बिजनेस मॉडल में ये होता है कि अगर उनका सब्सक्रिप्शन बेस स्ट्रांग है तो सब्सक्रिप्शन बेस स्ट्रांग होने पर ही वो जर्नल सस्टेन करता है। आप ये देखिए एल्सवेयर का जो जितना जितना बिजनेस है वो शायद हमारे भारत की आधी जीडीपी के बराबर है, एंड वी आर अनपेड वर्कर ऑफ द एल्सवेयर। सो इसलिए मेरा जो ये है कि वो उनका एक डिफरेंट, अगर आप हिंदी में शुरू करना चाहते हैं हिंदी में शुरू कर सकते हैं। आप जो है AICT या UGC वगैरह जो है वो उसे प्रमोट कर सकते हैं, लेकिन समस्या ये है कि उनको जो है पढ़ेगा कौन, उनको सब्सक्राइब कौन करेगा, ये एक होता है। और ये बिजनेस मॉडल पर वर्क करते हैं, इसलिए जो है ये दिक्कत है इसमें। तो हालांकि इसमें AICT या DST ये सब कुछ आगे आए हुए हैं हिंदी के लिए, लेकिन उनके साथ ये है कि बहुत से संस्थान, जब आप ग्लोबलाइजेशन के बारे में बात करते हैं तो आपको इसमें थोड़ा सा जो है एक असुविधा होती है।
जी सर। बस सर आप लोगों का क्या है, आप लोग अगर इस चीज को आगे बढ़ाएंगे तो मेरा एजुकेशन मतलब अभी बहुत ज्यादा नहीं है, एक्सपीरियंस बहुत ज्यादा नहीं है, बट मैं सर्च
मान्यवर
करता हूँ तो
आप अगर आपने राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति नई वाली जो पढ़ी हो उसमें ये एक मैंडेट है, और कल जो है प्रधानमंत्री जी ने
शिशिर मुझे आज्ञा दें, क्योंकि फिर मेरा भी
अवश्य
उधर।
हाँ
थैंक्स अ लॉट, थैंक यू ऑल ऑफ यू।
ओके धन्यवाद।
नमस्कार नमस्कार।
थैंक यू सर, थैंक
थैंक यू।
तो इसमें जो नई राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति आई हुई है जिसके बारे में कल प्रधानमंत्री जी ने भी ये बात कही है, तो उसमें जो है रीजनल लैंग्वेज, लेकिन आप ये देखिए कि रीजनल लैंग्वेज और हिंदी, क्या हमारे पास उतना सशक्त जो है वो जो किताबें उतनी सशक्त जो है हमारे पास जो है सुविधाएं हैं? इसके लिए पहले आपको जो है फाउंडेशन अपनी स्ट्रेंथ मजबूत करनी पड़ेगी, उसके बाद ही आपको जो है वो आगे आप बढ़ सकते हैं। फाउंडेशन में आपके पास पुस्तकें होनी चाहिए, आपके पास जो है वो और देखिए सरकार इस विषय में कार्य कर रही है, ऐसी बात नहीं है। आप देखिए तकनीकी शिक्षा में हिंदी को या अन्य रीजनल भाषाओं को प्रमोट करने के लिए काफी जो है उन्होंने काम किया, बट ये लोग आते ही नहीं उसमें।
थैंक यू सर।
ओके।
अब हमारे विभागाध्यक्ष वाईके मिश्रा सर से अनुरोध है कि कृपया वोट ऑफ थैंक्स।
Okay, thank you, Harsh. I am audible.
यस
सर।
Thank you, Harsh, and our director, sir, for providing us a great assistance in conducting this FDP. And I am also very much thankful on the behalf of the entire department of Electronics Engineering Department, KNIT Sultanpur, to all the participants, and especially the eminent speakers like Sudeep Kumar from IIT Roorkee, and Professor Basant Kumar from MNIT Allahabad, and Professor Pramod Tiwari from IIT Patna, and Professor Ratneshwar from JNU Delhi. So all these speakers have benefited the candidates who have joined the FDP. And once again, the last, I would like to thank the Dr. Harsh, who had taken pain, and despite of his very, very busy schedule, as I am aware that he is heavily loaded, but even then he has successfully conducting this FDP. So I am very much grateful to our director, sir, and the Harsh sir to bringing fame to the our department, that one FDP we have conducted in this academic session. So I would like to thank all the participants and the speakers. So very, very thank to all of you. Thank you, Harsh. If anything you want to convey, then you can convey. Over to Harsh.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, director, sir, and thank you all the participants. So now, after listening remarks, this FDP is over. Thanks again, director, sir, HOD, sir, and all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you all.